Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Couchbase, Vmware, and Teleport. I'm Stephen Fagg, Director of Database Trends and Applications in Unisphere Research. I will be your host for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled Ensuring Performance, Flexibility, and Security in the Cloud. Before we begin, I want to explain how you can be a part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the submit button. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible, but if your question has not been selected during the show, you will receive an email response. Plus, if you would like a copy of the presentation, you can download a PDF from the Handouts tab on the console once the event is archived. And just for participating in today's event, you could win a $100 Amazon gift card. Now, to introduce our speakers for today, we have Matt Groves, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Couchbase, Sudhir Balasubramanian, Senior Staff Solution Architect and Global Oracle Field Practice Lead at Vmware, and Alan Valancourt, Sales Engineer at Teleport. Now I'm going to pass the event over to Matt.
Hey, thanks very much, Stephen. I want to get things started here. We're going to talk about NoSQL Dbas for modern user experiences. I'm Matt Groves. I work at Couchbase. We are a modern NoSQL database company. And today I want to talk about these three topics. We're going to take a look about moving to the cloud in general and why organizations are doing it. You're going to hear a lot about that today, I'm sure. Next, I'm going to talk about Couchbase Cloud, which is a cloud-native database as a service that offers the features, scale, and ease of deployment that Couchbase can offer. And I'm going to end with some results from a third-party report that compares various database as a service offerings in the performance evaluation, as well as the cost implications, the total cost of ownership. So cloud and cloud managed services have been around for a while now, but growth and adoption has continued to increase. This is at least partially due to the way the world works now, but the past year has shown an emergence of decentralization of customers and employees. People are already using a lot of online services, but this has just led to an increase. This has shocked systems that weren't originally designed to handle that and left many companies and teams scrambling to solve the problems of a growing user base, trying to use increasingly slow applications. So many teams are turning to cloud-based services that can deliver faster and deliver better scaling. So these are some screenshots from various analyst firms that have all published studies to this effect. Initially in 2020, there was an expected pullback and a focus on cost savings, but then there was a shift in priorities. So a simple example of this in action is customers ordering online from the supermarkets, who now expect to get curbside pickup rather than go into the store. And something this basic can have big implications on the retailer. These services were offered before 2020, but now people are taking advantage of them a lot more often. So how does a retailer know when you're outside? How do you verify that it's the right customer? How do they interact with customers in this completely touchless online way? So these are the examples that are driving that kind of change. And just to zoom in on one of these is a study from 451 Research that found, for instance, 83% of organizations that they surveyed said they are modernizing and updating existing applications. So they're not necessarily focused just on cost savings and cutting back, but modernizing to adapt to customers' needs and wants. And so this, combined with moving to the cloud, means that a managed service, like a database as a service, a Dbas, can really accelerate these efforts and bring the right scale, the necessary scale to meet that demand. The key value points of a managed cloud service, such as Dbas, but other services in general, fall into four categories. So the first one is cost savings. You don't have to pay the cost of an on-premise data center, hardware, and other overhead costs. You can also take advantage of elasticity, scaling up and scaling down based on peaks and valleys. This way you can improve your TCO, and you can use economies of scale that public cloud providers can give you. Staff productivity is important as well. Your staff can spend less time on backups and upgrades and other non-functional maintenance tasks and focus on your core competencies and delivering value and innovation to your customers. Resilience is important. A Dbas can evolve quickly and recover from failure. So this lowers risk and reduces what your team has to actually manage. And finally, agility. So you can create large-scale environments on demand. and use them for production employment and or as a disposable sandbox for app development, R&D type of scenarios. So the as-a-service cloud model has become very popular among teams for these reasons. So now I'm going to talk about Couchbase Cloud and how it's ideally suited to provide that kind of required scale, flexibility, and ease of deployment to help you move into the cloud. So just Couchbase in a nutshell here, it's a combination of NoSQL concepts. So the processing of key value information in memory for really, really fast, low latency data access, and combine that with the distributed storage of JSON document-based data for schema flexibility, scale, and resilience. And there's other features that make up Couchbase, including text search and mobile synchronization that all make up the Couchbase platform. Now, Couchbase can be deployed anywhere, but it has a feature set that makes it cloud native, as we say. So containerization is an important part of Couchbase, including Kubernetes capabilities and including the mobile and edge capabilities. So a full set of built-in features like SQL querying, full text search, eventing, and analytics, things you no longer have to duct tape together from a bunch of different pieces. So this is what makes up Couchbase Server, which can be deployed anywhere, and it's what the Couchbase Cloud service is built with. So since this is a DBTA event, you probably already know this, but Couchbase has been a finalist and received awards in multiple categories. So thank you very much, DBTA and DBTA readers, for that. We really appreciate that, and that's something we are really proud of. Couchbase Cloud is our fully managed Dbas for Couchbase Server. So it offers automated deployment, scaling, failure recovery, upgrades, and backups as part of the service, monitoring and alerting of all Couchbase clusters, and management through a single pane of glass. Also offer hybrid cloud deployments, which is data that can be replicated from self-managed Couchbase clusters into Couchbase Cloud among different cloud providers and vice versa. And we also offer, and this is very important, in VPC for AWS or in VNet for Azure deployment. So your data is in your virtual private cloud. It's managed by you, encrypted and secured end to end. Now we do have a free trial, allows you to evaluate the service. We have a couple of paid offerings right now with different prices and support service level agreements, SLAs. But the end result is you get Couchbase Server and management with your cloud service provider, enabling you to optimize your infrastructure cost. So any pricing or discounts you have with cloud providers right now can be applied to Couchbase. Now the use cases that Couchbase is good for are the same ones that Couchbase in general is good for, but our most common use cases we see among our customers are not limited to, but some I wanted to call out are catalog and inventory management for sale, especially digital goods, profile and session management. So if you want to track users and all the flexibility of users and preferences, Customer 360, which ties into that, where you're going to get a complete view of a user or a customer from multiple systems. A legacy mainframe and offload, relational offload. So if you want to keep using a legacy system that you have kind of stuck in place, but you want to offload that data for performance reasons, you can use Couchbase for that. And of course, caching use cases. Couchbase is really great at caching the in-memory cache layer. Getting started with Couchbase is 3 easy steps. So you go to cloud.couchbase.com, create an account. You're going to get a free trial there. Next thing, create your Couchbase cloud environment. So currently AWS and Azure are supported. Google Cloud and others are coming soon. And once your account is set up, you can just spin up your cluster with a few clicks and start developing. There's actually code samples right there in the browser. You can just copy and paste to get started. The last thing I want to close on here is we wanted to analyze Couchbase Cloud performance and cost considerations compared to some of our main cloud competitors. So we actually worked with Altoros. This is a third party to create a report available on Couchbase.com, by the way, to evaluate Couchbase Cloud versus competitors, MongoDB Atlas and Amazon DynamoDB were the two that they chose there. And they use something called the YCSB, which is an open source benchmark spec for evaluating NoSQL databases. And these tests were across 4 different workloads and across 3 configurations each. So 4 workloads, 3 configurations, 3 databases. So 4 times 3 times 3, that's 36 different data points there that exist in this report. And actually, we used this performance report to come up with a formula to measure a TCO, the total cost of ownership value. So I'm going to walk you through that. YCSB, we use a subset of, or Altoros, I should say, use a subset of workloads. So A is a read-write heavy workload, so half reads, half writes. That's not a super common use case, but that is a use case that a lot of NoSQL databases are very good at and can be measured on. Workload E is for short ranges, so a lot of scans and then some updates. So that's more of a common workload in my experience anyway. Pagination, if you want to do like a page of information at a time using offset and limit. And then join is a SQL style join workload with both grouping and aggregation. And I will say Dynamo actually can't do this workload. There's not really equivalent of a join in Dynamo. So that's kind of a NA spot in the report there. But these were all run on AWS because Dynamo can only run on AWS. So we ran, Altoros ran all 3 of these reports, or all 3 of these workloads there. And to drill into detail a little bit, there are 3 configurations for each workload. So 6 nodes with 50 million records, 9 nodes with 100 million, 18 nodes with 200 million. And you can see some of the other information there. But those were the 3 different configurations we measured at. So, a relatively small to average size cluster to a larger one to an even larger one, just to kind of get an idea what the differences are as the workload increases, as the amount of data increases. And as a baseline for TCO, we also wanted to understand the relative costs going in for infrastructure and also licensing. So Altoros elected to match DynamoDB's spend to Mongo Atlas's spend, because with Dynamo you don't really reserve multiple instances, multiple nodes and servers. It's just kind of a black box. So you could spend more with Dynamo if you want to improve scale, of course, but we're looking at a total cost evaluation here. So that's why we, as Altoros, tried to match those numbers up there. I'm not going to show all the workloads today because we have just a limited amount of time, but this is workload A. This is the 50/50 reads and writes. And the first thing I want to point out there is the dotted lines. So these lines represent latency in milliseconds, and you can barely see the line for Couchbase because it's so low latency. It's near the bottom of the axis, or near the horizontal axis there. And this is because Couchbase has a built-in caching layer that these competitors don't have built in. They typically rely on other technologies to duct tape together that complete low latency solution. And you can see, looking at the bar chart there, you can see that for the smaller workload, Couchbase is, in the same ballpark as the competition. They're roughly close to each other. However, when we jump to the larger data sets, Couchbase has a much higher throughput, and that's operations per second. And this is due mainly because Couchbase's architecture actually is able to take reads at any node in that cluster. So every single node in Couchbase can handle some portion of the reads and the writes. There's nothing like a bottleneck or a load balancing that has to be routed through first. So based on this report, we created a common metric. Now this time, this is Couchbase actually creating this metric to evaluate the value of the 3 products. So each database is a little different, of course, but this gives a single value that's relevant across the board to measure TCO, total cost of ownership. So what we came up with is the idea of millions of operations per dollar. So how many operations can a dollar buy me? And since we know environment costs, and the Altoros report shows us operations per second, and we know how many seconds are in a month, we can create the formula and show the advantages and the trade-offs between these. So as we apply the formula to this is just for that first workload, the 6-node workload, the one where Couchbase was roughly on par with the competition. Dynamo comes out at 12.9 millions of operations per dollar. Atlas comes in at 8.1 million. Couchbase comes out at 15.7 million. So this is a Couchbase advantage there. You can see the percentages there at the bottom. And if the other workloads where Couchbase has a much higher throughput, the difference is going to be even larger. Benchmarks are nice, but what about the real world where it's always messier than benchmarks? Couchbase Cloud customer Facet Digital develops applications for their customers in a variety of use cases. For them, Couchbase Cloud was the only Dbas that addressed all their requirements. So they switched from another well-known Dbas to Couchbase Cloud, reduced their costs by 50%, increased performance by 2,000%, and they consolidated from 3 duct-taped products into one Couchbase platform, going from 3.5 days of setup to 20 minutes, which is the difference between we'll get something for you later this week and we'll have something done by the time this presentation is over. So that's it. If you're interested in Couchbase Cloud, you can go check out cloud.couchbase.com/signup, and there's a free self-service trial available there. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to pass it back over to Stephen.
Thank you very much, Matt. At this point, I'd like to introduce our next speaker today. We have Sudhir Balasubramanian, Senior Staff Solution Architect and Global Oracle Field Practice Lead at VMware.
Thank you, Stephen. So now let's take a look at how we can ensure performance, flexibility, and security in the cloud for, let's say, business-critical Oracle application workloads. So this is the agenda for today's discussion. Essentially, we start with talking about, what are the stringent requirements for business-critical workloads, essentially Oracle here. What are the features and benefits that VMware vSphere platform can offer to these business-critical workloads? What do customers essentially want, which is VMware Hybrid Cloud? I'll go a bit into the cloud as well, and I'll pick VMware Cloud on AWS as an example. We'll talk about how we can deploy and migrate Oracle workloads from on-premises to VMware Cloud on AWS and back, and essentially I'll follow that up by a couple of collaterals and wrap up. All right. So from a business critical application perspective, right? So these BCA applications, as we fondly call them, or business critical applications as we call them, right? They have many stringent requirements. For example, any application that is deemed business critical should have certain SLAs, right? It should have certain RTO, RPOs, and requirements. And some of those requirements include availability. Well, this application must be highly available. It must be resilient. It must have redundancy. Performance, that's another aspect. That's another requirement. Timely process completion, that's critical. I mean, one should make sure that all of the bottlenecks should be avoided. Recoverability, the RTO, the RPO, the MTD, I mean, all of them, that should be very, very, very low, right? The recovery plans must be verifiable. It must be repeatable. Scalability, well, it should be adaptive, and we should be able to scale up. We should be able to scale out. We should be able to grow with, very little reconfiguration effort. For example, right, if we have to, let's say, hot add CPU or hot add memory or hot add, let's say, storage to a virtual machine or to a server, right, that should happen on the fly without affecting any of the business processes. So VMware vSphere platform, I mean, that provides capabilities and provides features, benefits to these BCA applications to help meet their stringent requirement and meet the business SLAs. With some of the features like, we won't have time to go into all of the features, but I really want to call some of the notable features out, like resource maximization, right? And rapid provisioning and scaling. So the ability to scale up, the ability to scale out resources, like I said, hot adding CPU, hot adding memory, hot adding disk, etc. Enhanced availability, in which case you're enabling application level HA, for example, right, running Oracle RAC with infrastructure level HA that VMware HA provides right out of the gate. And if we were to stretch this Oracle RAC across metro distance, right, what we provide right now is essentially 3 levels of HA. Oracle RAC provides app level HA. You have VMware vSphere platform providing the infrastructure level HA along with site level high availability that is provided either by VMware Metro Storage Cluster or, let's say, vSAN Storage Cluster, right? Performance. Features like persistent memory, features like PVRDMA drivers, 1 gig large memory pages or huge pages, virtual NVMe drivers, right? The 512E drive support, the automatic space reclamation, the unmapped feature, right? Optimization, for example, proactive HA, right? Orchestrated VMware restart using high availability, the optimized initial VM placement. The fact that right now DRS, or the distributed resource scheduler that we have, that's the algorithm that basically places or chooses the ESXi server that the virtual machine should land on. That's network aware, right? And then we have made a lot of enhancements to vMotion. We have made a lot of enhancements to the DRS, right? And if you start looking at the business continuity aspect, right, using VMware Site Recovery Manager, using vSphere replication, vCDR. So essentially, this list of features and benefits, that keeps going on and on, right? So with vSphere 7.0, vSphere 7.0, that's a major release, and that has a ton of great new features, right? And these are some of the features of vSphere 7.0 that includes, as we can see here on the slide, improved distributed resource scheduler, DRS. I mean, you have the assignable hardware, you have the refactored vMotion, the fact that vSphere now is bundled with Kubernetes, you have the vSphere Lifecycle Manager, I mean, intrinsic security. I mean, essentially, we won't have time to go through all of them, but I really do want to call out, right, some of the notable ones for business critical application, especially improved DRS or improved distributed resource scheduler, right? So for example, the improved DRS now focuses on what's called the happiness of a virtual machine or a workload, rather than looking at the entire cluster per se, right? So in the previous version, we used to look at the entire cluster per se. Right now, what we do is we focus on something that's very critical for a workload, the virtual machine happiness. So in doing so, the DRS now becomes more powerful when making resource decisions from, let's say, initial placement to workload balancing. So DRS now has the intelligence to work with containers. It also uses a new feature called scalable shares to solve some of the challenges with resource pools. And the link at the bottom of the slide, essentially, that talks about the vSphere resource management for 7.0. And 7.0 was released last year, April 2nd, 2020. All right. So moving on to vSphere 7 Update 2, right? That's the latest and the greatest version of vSphere, containing our goals of making infrastructure technology advanced, but also easy to use and very secure at the same time, right? So more hardware support for persistent memory. That's what this feature has. It has GPUs, new CPUs, including advanced security features that AMD offers, right? We essentially are making it even easier to deliver applications with load balancers and private registries, right? So, and also upholding our commitment to always bringing customers the latest release of Kubernetes. vSphere native key provider that removes the friction, we provide options for organizations that want encryption. So essentially, the journey from vSphere 5.5 all the way till vSphere 7.0 U2, we have been bundling a lot of features right around the way. So vSphere 7.0 Update 2 essentially has a lot of features built in for business critical applications. Now, what do customers really want? I mean, they want an integrated and a hybrid approach, right? So as customers, they move to the cloud. They're looking for ways to get best of both the worlds without having to buy, let's say, new hardware. They don't want to do any kind of rework. They don't want to do any kind of replatforming or refactoring, right? They want to leverage existing investment skills and tools, right? So with on-premises, right, what we are able to do, our customers are able to do is use familiar tools and processes. You're able to leverage existing investments. You're able to maintain unique hardware configurations. And at the same time, no one is able to have granular control over, let's say, placement of apps and data. Now, on the other hand, with public clouds, one is able to scale faster. One is able to reduce cost. You're able to establish global footprint, adopt the pay-as-you-go model and access broader range of services, right? What we have seen is essentially complexities hindering full hybrid cloud value. I mean, these are some of the challenges with hybrid cloud adoption, namely operational inconsistency. Well, different skill sets and different tools are required. There are disparate management tools, security controls. You have inconsistent application SLAs. There are multiple virtual machine formats as one goes from one cloud provider to another cloud provider, right? So, and typically, what we see with any cloud migration, right, what we have seen is application and infrastructure rework, that is 60% of the cost. And that pretty much takes up 90% of the developer's time, right? So with a simple L2 VPN or with a simple layer 2 VPN that is configured over direct connect, right, from, let's say, on-premises to the cloud, one could avoid the application rework. One could avoid this application refactoring, right, which includes essentially avoiding IP address changes, changing the format of the virtual machine, or any other network changes. So for those customers, they want to adopt cloud. Some of the use cases that we have seen is data center extension, disaster recovery. You have cloud migration, next generation app, essentially app modernization. So those are some of the use cases that we have seen so far. VMware Cloud offerings, they include, as of to date, VMware Cloud AWS, which was GA'd on 2017. We also have OCVS, Oracle Cloud VMware Solution, announced 2019 during the Oracle Open World. We have Google Cloud VMware Engine, GCVE, that was GA 2020. And last but not the least, Azure VMware Solution, AVS, that was GA'd on May 2020. And also we have, I think, IBM Software and Alibaba as well. So we do have a lot of options when one wants to move from on-premises to a VMware cloud offering. There are so many cloud offerings that we have on the horizon here today. All right. So as I said, we will be focusing and talking about one cloud offering in particular, right? So essentially, VMware Cloud on AWS. So VMC, as we fondly call it, right? So together with HCX, the VMware Hybrid Cloud extension, VMC and HCX, they enable customers to accelerate their cloud migration in the simplest, the fastest, and the lowest risk way with compelling TCO. Right? So what VMC brings, it brings the VMware Enterprise Class Software-Defined Data Center, SDDC software, as you guys may have, will call it, right? So, and essentially, those SDDC components are the VMware vSphere, the VMware vSAN, and the VMware NSX, along with the vCenter management and robust disaster protection. And that's optimized to run on dedicated, elastic Amazon EC2 bare metal infrastructure, and that's fully integrated as part of the AWS cloud. So what happens is this enables customers to run their production applications across the VMware vSphere-based private, public, and hybrid cloud environments with optimized access to AWS services. So now with the same architecture and operational experience that you have on premises, and you have that same architecture and the operational experience in the cloud, what customer IT teams can do is they can now quickly derive instance business value, right, from use of AWS and VMware hybrid cloud experiences, right? Essentially, you're able to get the fully operational consistency with on-premises SDDC, seamless workload portability, hybrid operations. You are now able to manage your cloud-based resources with familiar VMware tools without hassles of learning new skills or utilizing new tools. The best part is you're able to get direct access to native AWS services. All right. So let's take an example of how you can migrate a single instance Oracle workload from on-premises to VMware Cloud on AWS, right? So as we can see, we have a single instance Oracle virtual machine on premises that can be successfully migrated to VMware Cloud on AWS transparently in a couple of mouse clicks. So essentially, L2 VPN or layer 2 VPN is set up between on-premises and VMC to avoid any kind of application rework and refactoring that I spoke about using Direct Connect. So simply by using the web client, right? Essentially by right-clicking on the virtual machine, choosing the migration method, the resource pool, the storage, the destination network port group, one could seamlessly and transparently migrate this single instance workload to VMware Cloud on AWS, right? And you're able to come back the same way if we choose to, right? So with no breach in SLAs, with no application refactoring, with no application reworking, right? And the link at the bottom of the slide, that has a reference to the deployment, migration, and configuration of the Oracle workloads on VMware Cloud on AWS. So this slide basically has some useful links and collaterals. As you can see, it also talks about the Oracle and VMware support policy changes as of October 9, 2019. Some licensing collaterals, talking about CPU, custom CPU core count, and so on and so forth on the VMware Cloud on AWS. But moving on to the next slide here. Right. Last but not the least, all Oracle on vSphere white papers, including, let's say, Oracle on VMware Hybrid Cloud Deployment and Migration Guide, the Best Practices Guide, Workload Characterization Guide, Oracle RAC guide that talks about how you can use Oracle with persistent memory or PV-RDMA drivers. I mean, any and all collateral can be found in the URL here. But that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. And back to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Sudhir. At this point, I'd like to introduce our final speaker for today. We have Alan Valancourt, Sales Engineer at Teleport.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, everyone, for taking time of your busy day to join us in today's webinar. I'm going to just talk high level, really, databases, the cloud, and you, because you're here because you are working with databases, you're working with the cloud, and it all comes down to someone has got to do the dirty work, right? So a little bit, brief history, and this might be your current environment that you're running today. The pre-cloud era when AWS and GCP options were not available, where, cloud-based and their, Dbas, was not around. We're hosting our databases internal network. Bandwidth typically wasn't an issue because we're on a LAN. Everyone had admin privileges, right? You just, hey, here we go, folks. It's just somebody needs access database, just give them admin rights. Limited auditing and monitoring. APM tools might not have been really mature. Telemetry, being able to figure out what's happening was not a huge consideration. Scaling, you just call the network guys and say, hey, I need a new box. Build me some more hardware. Or if you're in, VMware or Hyper-V, you say, provision me some new instances. You just call your buddy, walk over to the next cubicle, and kind of go from there. And then we would build database servers for every application request, right? If you had a master license, enterprise license, or you weren't concerned with that, it didn't kind of fall in your pocketbook. You just, hey, somebody says you need an app, product team, marketing, whoever, you just build a new database server and just kind of go on from there. And then many times in these environments, we had a full team of database admins, scattered environment, everybody concentrating, SQL Server admins, Oracle DBAs, maybe some open source with Postgres or MySQL DBAs, kind of the whole 9 yards. And then queries, right? Whether the DBAs writing the query or the software developers writing queries and stored procedures, they're functional. They got the work done. They probably were not the most optimized queries. And, for not thinking about SQL injection attacks and different things like that, because our applications and things we're doing were kind of internal networks. So we were not as concerned about that. Which leads me to security. It was the best effort, right? We had a firewall. We had a router. All ports internally were wide open. It's on our LAN. Yeah, why should I worry about that? Then, of course, backups, you threw that over the wall to the backup team, and their job was to configure. And you just said, here's my server. You back it up, and maybe we should do a restore. We'll see what happens. And unfortunately, I hope some of you are thinking like, oh, man, we still do some of these things today. But this is changing as the cloud era as mentioned by Matthew and even Sudhir, over the last year, applications and teams and companies, and the growth of it is only exponentially going to get larger. So now in the cloud era, what happens now? Our databases are hosted on someone else's network, as we just mentioned, AWS, GCP, Azure, a Dbas service, etc. Rethinking permissions. Internally, we just kind of gave everyone permission, but now we do that externally, we're going to get compromised. So there's new things here like RBAC, IAM, MFA, multi-factor. It gets complicated really fast. And then, of course, your auditing and monitoring options increase. Do we keep using legacy or homegrown tools? Do we use cloud-native tooling that's built into a cloud service provider like CloudWatch or CloudTrail or something along that line? And then, of course, one reason why we like going to the cloud is being able to scale, right? Scale on demand. You just click and boom, I didn't have to wait 30 days for a ticket to be resolved by my IT department. I just hit the plus button on AWS or whatever, and I just spun up more instances and scaled my database. And even now with Dbas and others, that as your transactions increase, your data increase, the scaling happens automatically. You don't even give it a second thought anymore. And of course, we're adding new and additional databases or application. It makes it a little bit easier. Instead of spinning up a whole new server, a whole new instance, you add, a couple clicks, or if you're running infrastructure as code, you can just quickly add new and additional databases to support applications, even if it's, a minimum viable product or your greenfield, brownfield, however you want. It's really easy to do that. And of course, now that changes our DBA roles, right? If you got someone who is their whole career has been on-prem, maybe an Oracle admin, and that's all, then all of a sudden you say, boom, you're on AWS now. What do they do? A lot more things to learn. So now we're bringing other teams in. SREs, security is now involved. Hence the term coined many years ago, DevOps and DevSecOps. Multiple people are now involved in these databases and these roles. And so your queries need to be refactored to take advantage of cloud native. You can't just throw a SQL statement or something that, in an application. It's going to get compromised with SQL injection attacks or different things out there. You have to, optimize those queries, taking advantage of cloud native stuff like Lambda or serverless to run short-lived or queries along that line. So you really have to rethink how you're doing some of that. And of course, going back to security, right? The cloud is not secure by default. Those big providers, unless they're Dbas and they have it well written, they're saying, here's here's your infrastructure. You guys do what you need to do. We're going to have some levels of security, but you as an end user need to be responsible for managing your applications and your databases. And so moving to the cloud, you have to be more security focused. It's a critical issue. Then one thing a lot of folks don't realize, latency. You know, if you're used to working on a local area network in an enterprise and you don't worry about that, but all of a sudden you throw it on the cloud and everything seems to go slower. Maybe there's some latency issues. You know, you can't bypass physics. You know, users in Asia or EMEA in Europe or Australia, it's going to take some time for that query, that data to go from US East or US West all the way back to them in a round trip. So something you have to kind of take in consideration on that. So just because you throw it on the cloud doesn't mean you can ignore it. You know, we built databases for performance first typically, and security considerations were secondary many times. It's easy to gloss over those databases when we're, you know, talking about DevOps and DevSecOps because it is hard. You know, we're like, it's easy to stand up infrastructure, it's easy to spin up Kubernetes. When we're talking databases, a lot of times we scratch our head, we throw it underneath the carpet, and we kind of ignore it. You know, it makes it hard to automate, makes it hard to scale, it makes it hard to secure at the same time. So what are some of these companies doing to alleviate these headaches? And, you know, Sudhir had a great slide there showing that hybrid model where you're seeing a lot of that happening from just using from the cloud aspect. But typically, you know, companies are coming in, they're doing that tried and true method. They're lifting and shifting that workload. And, you know, you take it from on-prem, you get an initiative, you throw it on the cloud, you lift it, move it out there, shift it, and boom, you're up there. It's easy to do, easy to run, but, you know, works great in the short term. Might not be the best thing to do in the long term because that application, that database that you're running locally probably needs to be refactored for the cloud. Which brings on the second piece, right? Re-architecting, re-platforming. You know, take advantage of cloud-native technologies. You know, tools like Couchbase, Redis, you know, Mongo, and things like that, you know, NoSQL databases or Aurora, things that are in the cloud, that are cloud-native design with APIs, using database services that can help you scale if you don't have the manpower. You know, the Dbas model is a phenomenal way to take advantage of the cloud without you having to spin up a lot of that, you know, potential costly infrastructure on your own. So no matter what we're doing, you know, how we're doing it, we're adding layers of complexity into them. You know, we're re-architecting of the platform, going from a simple 1-2 tier system, web, you know, we got application, database, you know, firewall, to a multi-tier system with different availability zones, different VPCs, data centers across the world. So it changes dramatically, you know, how, you know, those layers of complexity. If you start whiteboarding it out, it can get really busy really fast. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, latency considerations, huge factor that I think a lot of practitioners, admins don't realize is where does your app live? Where's the data coming from? Where are your users? You know, so you say, hey, let's throw a database here in US West, but we're all East Coast and our users are all East Coast or something. And you know, there's going to be some latency. So you have to think through that and kind of figure out, you know, what to do on there. Do we keep the same database stack, right? Do we keep doing what we've always been doing, running Microsoft SQL Server, running Oracle or Maria or Postgres? Or do we look at newer technologies? It gives us an opportunity to re-architect, say, hey, let's take advantage of newer database technologies that might be better fit for our applications. Really great if you have greenfield MVP type applications where, you know, there's no baggage, there's no skeletons in the closet that you can easily just, you know, leverage something cloud native and kind of roll from there. And then of course, costs, right? A lot of companies say we're going to the cloud because we don't have to have all this infrastructure. And, you know, they're initially getting on the cloud is easy. I mean, today you can go out there, get some credits, you can start spinning things up, and you can be on the cloud in minutes, and your costs can be very minute. But what happens is, if you're not careful, is that cost can quickly spiral out of control, right? Because you start scaling systems, and one thing about the cloud, you forget you're running databases, you spin up 10 test databases, and then you forget about them. They run all night long, all weekend long with no traffic, and you're paying that cost. So if you're not keeping a good eye on what is happening, you know, that cost could quickly spiral out of control. And of course, security considerations. And this is where tools like Teleport come in and other tools out there that help manage some of those security considerations around that. So we're going to talk, segue here slightly, the problem with secure database access. Once we have it up there, what do we do? And here are some 4 key points that we see and that I think people see all the time. Access and data. How are you protecting that sensitive data, segmenting access to those systems? How do you provide access to specific databases? Not everybody needs admin. Not everybody needs to see everything. HR needs to see their stuff, but sales doesn't need to see HR's information. Identity, mapping, that database activity to an SSO identity. As the question here, right? Who connected to a database as Postgres? Like right now, if you run that query, you're just going to see that. You might not have that visibility into your users, your DBAs, your developers accessing your databases. So being able to map that activity and kind of figure out what's going on. And then auditing, huge factor, especially for compliance, SOC compliance, FedRAMP, FIPS, HIPAA, whole 9 yards, right? We've got all kinds of, the ability to, figure out and audit who ran, a select star on everything in production, right? and then brought our system to its knees. And of course, multi-environment, databases in different environments, a database in another cluster, test databases. Maybe you have some contractors or summer interns, that are coming in. You don't want them on production. Do their work on a UAT, on a test system, and then, have the push button deployments or the manual deployments to production related stuff. And so going into that, so how do you start? Don't reinvent the wheel when it comes to securing the workloads. A lot of this has already been done by folks. Use best practices and known standards. Hire the right people with the right skill set, which is really challenging. Always be learning. If you're old school, traditional person, be willing to embrace change. Tools that you can trust, open source, look in the code of what's out there. Leveraging analytics and telemetry to make better decisions in your database and what you're doing. And then using short-lived certificates and not keys for public access. Use certificates because they expire, whereas keys, maintaining it and rotating those can be a real challenge. So Teleport is a tool that's an open source tool that can handle a lot of these challenges, whether it's Kubernetes, applications, or databases. Teleport and its access plane enables engineers, enables users to manage that. So from a high level, we've got a proxy, we've got an authentication server, a CA server. Users are using their database tools to access. And then on the back end, wherever the database lives, you're getting a short-lived certificate that will then push that information across. And now you've got auditing, you've got tracking, you've got RBAC permissions, and you're protecting your database and your data workloads across the board there. Right now we support Postgres, Amazon Aurora, MySQL. Just released 6.2 this week with Redis. And in 7.0 in July, we've got MongoDB as well, and continuing adding more. So how do you start? Where do you go? Right here, goteleport.com. You go to GitHub. You want to look at our project, get involved in it. We love open source contributors. If you want to play with it today and figure it out, goteleport.com/teleport/download. And that's all I got. Appreciate your time. Back to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Alan. At this point, we're going to move into the discussion portion of today's event, look at some questions from our viewers. Matt, the first question is for you. Where can I deploy Couchbase? Is it only available in the cloud?
Yeah, a good question. And I think Couchbase has been around for a while. Couchbase Cloud is a relatively new offering, just about 1.5 years, I think. But so Couchbase is something you can just download and run wherever you want to. You can run on Windows, Mac, or Linux. We also provide an official Docker image. So if you want to run it in Docker, Docker Compose, you can do that. We actually are at DockerCon today talking about that sort of stuff. You can also run it in a Kubernetes cluster. You can Couchbase has an operator. We're the first NoSQL database to make an operator generally available. So you can deploy Couchbase to any number of Kubernetes offerings, OpenShift or AKS or whatever you'd like to deploy to Kubernetes. And of course, Couchbase Cloud, which is what I talked about today, which is a fully managed cluster, but it runs in your VPC. So you still have visibility into the data, and you can encrypt it and take advantage of your existing rates with a public cloud provider. It's a good question.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, Sudhir, our next question is for you. What are the biggest reasons that Oracle users hesitate to move to a hybrid cloud infrastructure, and how does a VMware cloud architecture address those issues?
Yeah. So, some of the compelling reasons for this hesitation essentially is the application refactoring and the rework that I spoke about in my slide, right? So that needs to be done when one moves from on-premises to a cloud environment, right? The very fact that you have lack of features in the cloud environment, which provides performance, resiliency, and scalability to the application. Well, that's another factor that comes in my mind, right? So what happens is with VMware Cloud, whatever the flavor of VMware Cloud it may be, right? Whether that's VMware Cloud on AWS or OCVS or GCP or AVS, as long as we have an L2 VPN connection between the on-premises and the VMware Cloud environment, there is no need for any of these application refactoring or rework, right? The fact that VMware, the rich platform, right, that gives so much features, right, be that on-premises or VMware Cloud, it provides the performance, the high availability, resiliency, scalability, security, and so on and so forth. That helps business-critical Oracle workloads immensely to achieve that kind of resiliency, to achieve that level of business SLAs that is required of it.
Understood. Thanks, Sudhir. Okay, Alan, our next question is for you. Why should I use certificates for authentication to a database over public-private keys or username passwords?
Yeah, great question. I know I glossed over that really high level. Short-lived certificates, which are TLS or X509 certificates, you won't want to use those because they expire. If a user is using a key or username and password that gets compromised, or a public-private key, and you're deploying those out to your databases or to your workloads, and somebody leaves, you have to roll that key. And it can be really challenging if you don't have that process automated. Whereas leveraging a tool like Teleport or using short-lived certificates, that session automatically expires after a predefined amount of time. So you say the person comes in, they're daily user, they have 8 hours, typically working in day. So they log in, they get 8 hours, and after 8 hours, that certificate expires, and their sessions will no longer work. They would have to re-authenticate to the system in order to get a new certificate. So it's a great way of managing access and control without worrying about keys.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying, Alan. Okay, Matt, we're circling back to you. Question is, can I sync data between Couchbase Cloud and Couchbase Server running in my own data center?
Yes. So I just answered the last question. It kind of relates to this, is that you can run Couchbase in any number of different deployment models and environments. Couchbase has a feature built in called XDCR, that's cross data center replication. And it's been around in Couchbase for a long, long time. And it's a protocol that syncs data between clusters in real time. So as you make a change to one cluster, that change will get synchronized to another cluster. And you can use this to set up hybrid deployments like we were talking about earlier in this session. So your data center, your cloud providers, et cetera, they can all sync with each other. So you could have, for instance, Azure in the West, you could have AWS in the East, you could have your own on-premises data center, and they can all be in sync with each other, one-way or two-way. And you can also use it to set up geofencing. So if you have a data center in Europe, you can keep data from ever leaving Europe, for instance, if there's regulations for that. And so that's all available inside with Couchbase's XDCR feature.
Got it. Thanks, Matt. Okay, Sudhir, next question. What's the most useful and interesting VMware feature that has enhanced Oracle installations over the last year?
Yep. So, features like scaling up or scaling down, scaling up or scaling out of resources, right? Features like persistent memory, para-virtualized RDMA drivers, the 4K sector support, the fact that DRS used to be reactive before, but right now DRS, this stands for Distributed Resource Scheduler, is now completely proactive, right? And DRS is also network aware. The fact that, things that were taken for granted, for example, vMotion, has been vastly improved with vSphere 7.0. I mean, these some of the features, notable features, they basically help accelerate business-critical Oracle workloads, right? And these are some of the key features that Oracle architects, Oracle database administrators, they look forward to take advantage to accelerate their Oracle workloads.
Understood. Thanks, Sudhir. Okay, Alan, we're going back to you. Question is, how can I request a new database to be added to Teleport?
That is awesome. We love community contributions. Because we are an open source focused company on GitHub, you can actually submit a pull request if you've built maybe a database integration, or you can we have a community discussion boards. We also have a community Slack channel where we take, where people come in and say, hey, are you guys supporting this? There are so many databases out there, and we talk to our devs all the time saying, when can we have this? And there's only so many hours in a day, and we want these guys to have a real life, right? And so, but that would be a couple ways to best engage with us to get something going. Check out our Slack community and our GitHub discussions.
Hey, do you have an address for that, Alan? Because I think I'd like to see Couchbase on that slide and sometime in the future.
I figured Couchbase might come up here. I will definitely, I don't have the address off the top. It's off our GitHub. I had it in my last slide there. Listed, and that's where our discussions and suggestions come in from.
No, thank you.
All right. So I have a question for all three of you. Based on the research that we've conducted amongst our subscribers, as well as seen in the market, it certainly appears that the situation with the pandemic accelerated digital transformation efforts, and cloud was a big part of that. Fingers crossed, it looks like we are kind of coming out of that situation, at least with respect to the COVID pandemic. But what do you see as the biggest challenge and opportunity over the next 12 months related to the cloud? And Matt, why don't we start with you?
Oh gosh, it's really hard to predict the future. I think that if anything, 2020 and beyond has taught us that. And I do hope you're right that we're coming out of it. At least parts of the world are, and hopefully the rest of the world will follow. What is going to be the biggest challenge for the cloud in the next 12 months? Let's see. I think it's going to be very much along the lines of what Alan was talking about in terms of, and Sudhir were talking about in terms of, setting up some sort of hybrid deployments. If you're still not fully committed to the cloud, how do you actually go ahead and make that? And lift and shift approach is, like was mentioned, a straightforward approach, but I really think, even lifting and shifting from a relational database over to Couchbase is becoming easier to do, but there's still lots of skills that you need in order to analyze that data model and to rework your application or refactor your application in order to take advantage of some of the unique capabilities of those new databases. So I think that'll be a challenge. I think Couchbase is working to address that by making it a very familiar environment for relational developers and legacy developers to very easily understand the equivalent concepts in a NoSQL database. And Couchbase actually provides SQL as a query language. So we're trying to give developers a head start who have not dipped into the NoSQL world yet to make that transition a nice smooth one.
Understood. And, do you think that for a lot of enterprises, the future will be very much kind of a hybrid scenario?
I think at very least for large enterprises, a hybrid cloud scenario is a very realistic and approach to kind of hedging for a number of different reasons. As far as a hybrid between on-premises, I think if companies need to take an edge approach where they need to have data centers or devices that are closer to their customers and users, that may be the hybrid approach we see shaking out in the next year or so.
Interesting. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate your insight. So, Sudhir, what are your thoughts on this? Over the next 12 months, biggest challenge and opportunity related to cloud?
Right. So, I do see a lot of opportunities, right? And I do see a lot of avenues of opportunity translating these challenges, right, into opportunities. And the reason why I say that is if the cloud vendors are able to, up the ante and make sure that the features that they, that any other platform are able to provide on premises, if they could provide the features in the cloud, right? And what happens is this journey becomes more seamless and more transparent, right? The features that I spoke of, for example, making sure that you have GPUs, right? FPGAs, you have persistent memory, you have RDMA drivers, right? Anything that is able to accelerate the workload. So customers get the same look and feel when they run the workload on premises, right? As they are able to run that in the cloud. So that way, they make their journey more seamless and transparent, right? But I think those are some of the challenges, and I know some of these challenges are not very easy, right? But I look at them as opportunities, right? Because definitely that is something that customers want, right? A hybrid cloud approach where they want to keep their sensitive data, right, on premises with essentially bursting to the cloud, either for data center evacuation or let's say disaster recovery or any of the app modernization. And once they land in the cloud, they kind of expect to have that same look and feel and capability what they had on premises. So I think it's now the owners and the cloud providers to, really up their ante, up the game to make sure that these features finally find their way into the cloud.
Interesting. And VMware is in an interesting position. I remember years ago, you were almost exclusively focused on vSphere, but now every aspect of the data center or public cloud can be something VMware-based. Do you find that this is drawing more people to VMware?
Absolutely. I mean, the industry use of the VMware technology, that's been accelerating with every new release of the VMware platform, right? That provide all of the features that I've spoken about in the call here today, right? So the thing is, with the advent of VMware Cloud, starting with VMC or VMware Cloud in AWS in 2017, right? The rate of acceleration has only increased with customers choosing to go to the cloud for a variety of reasons that I've spoken about. The DC center extension, or let's say DR, or bursting to the clouds, the evacuation, or app modernization. So the fact that we have VMware running on premises, we have the different flavors of VMware Cloud, right? That makes this journey more seamless and transparent. So absolutely. This trend has been accelerating with every new release of VMware.
Understood. Alan, I'd love to get your opinion on this. We see security coming up again and again whenever we do surveys, related to cloud adoption, cloud migration, cloud management. Over the next 12 months, biggest challenge as well as opportunity that you're seeing in the world of cloud?
I think besides hiring talent, which is really hard today, the biggest thing, especially over the last year when companies now are being a lot more distributed, a huge embrace, that sudden influx of get our apps, get our users on the cloud. The biggest challenge is auditing, logging, and securing these resources. And, from our enterprise side at Teleport, where we see customers saying, we've got compliance this, we need to know who's gaining access to this. We're moving workloads to the cloud, and we need to have better visibility into those workloads. I think that's a huge challenge. I also think it's a great opportunity for companies to start thinking and jumping. Cloud technology is continuing to improve. It's got that hockey stick growth curve, I still firmly believe, and innovative technology companies like VMware, Couchbase, it's going to make it way more enticing for customers to want to make that journey.
Understood. Well, we are at the top of the hour. That went fast. I'd like to thank our speakers today, Matt Groves, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Couchbase, Sudhir Balasubramanian, Senior Staff Solution Architect and Global Oracle Field Practice Lead at VMware, and Alan Valancourt, Sales Engineer at Teleport. If you would like to review this presentation or send it to a colleague, you can use the same exact URL that you used to log on to the live event today. It will be archived. It should be up tomorrow afternoon, actually, and you will receive an email once that archive is posted. Plus, again, if you would like a copy of the presentation, you can download a PDF from the Handouts tab on the console once the event is archived. And just for participating in today's event, you could win this $100 Amazon gift card. The winner will be announced tomorrow. We will reach out to you via email if you are the lucky viewer. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Have a great holiday weekend if you're in the States, and we hope to see you again soon.